Hey guys, Dr. Stitzel here. So today we want to talk about prices. Remember before that we talked about the idea that prices convey information. In this video, we're going to make the case that they're also a signal and they provide incentives for market actors. The first thing we want to talk about is markets and how they link the world. Let's take the case of Valentine's Day. There are about 180 million roses bought and sold on Valentine's Day. And these roses are produced in Lake Naivasha, Kenya. The people that work the fields, mostly women in Kenya, don't know anything about the Western tradition that is Valentine's Day. Rather, they know that if they debud roses such that they bloom in time for them to be shipped all about the world and delivered by February 14th, that they get paid more. So the market for roses convey this information to the women in Kenya without any explicit information about the reasons for the valuation of the roses happening in the process. These roses are then sent in large part to Aalsmeer, Holland, the largest flower market in the world. It's about 20 million flowers bought and sold in the time leading up to the holiday. These are then shipped all about the world to London, New York, Amarillo, the list goes on. So markets link the entire world. When Valentine's rolls around and you go to buy your significant other a flower, you're not worried your local florist won't have roses. But you probably never stop to think that that should be really astounding to us, given that Valentine's Day happens in February and not many roses are naturally blooming in February. Of course, markets don't just link the world, they also link to each other. In the 1970s, roses were grown in American greenhouses. So they were heated and used greenhouse technology to grow roses. Later, in the late 1970s, oil prices increased and made it such that it was actually cheaper to grow and transport roses than it was to heat the greenhouses that roses were grown in. It's not obvious, though, that flower production should be moved from California to Kenya. And this move actually, of course, wasn't planned. It's of human action, but not of human design. Entrepreneurs come up with creative responses to market forces. Let's take another example. How are oil and candy bars and even brick driveways related? One way is obvious. Higher energy costs increase the cost of production for most products, including candy bars. But the market also links oil and candy bars in much more subtle ways. For instance, ethanol is an active ingredient in alcoholic beverages. It's also a good fuel that can be made from a variety of crops, such as corn or sugar. Brazil is the largest producer and consumer of fuel ethanol in the world, so much so that it has managed to reduce its gasoline consumption by 40% by adopting flexible fuel vehicles that can run on ethanol, gasoline, or any combination of the two. Brazil is also the largest producer of sugar in the world. Now you can see the connection between the price of oil and the price of candy bars. As the price of oil increases, Brazilians shift sugar cane from sugar production to ethanol production, thereby holding down the fuel costs and increasing the price of sugar. How about those driveways? A 42-gallon barrel of crude oil is refined into approximately 20 gallons of gasoline, 10 gallons of fuel oil, 4 gallons of jet fuel, or a gallon and a half of asphalt, as well as a number of other products. To some extent, these divisions are fixed. Asphalt is what you get after you separate out other products. But oil refiners do have some flexibility, and when the price of gasoline is high, it pays for them to pull every last drop of gasoline out of each barrel of crude, leaving less to make the other products. A higher price of gasoline, therefore, means a reduced supply of asphalt. A reduced supply of asphalt pushes up the price for asphalt, and the price for asphalt to pave an average-sized driveway increases, or any driveway. Seeing the higher price, homeowners then move away from asphalt towards substitutes, concrete, cobblestones, or brick. This brings us to the great economic problem. The great economic problem is how to arrange limited resources to satisfy as many wants as possible. Let's take an example. Suppose that OPEC restricts oil, right? Therefore, oil must be economized. It should be obvious that reducing all uses equally is unwise. Some uses are more valuable. We don't want to just say, let's reduce use of oil in every single capacity by 5%. Suppose then that the government wants to choose which options should reduce their oil usage and which are allowed to continue. Right? We actually see some policies, such as that 1970s situation, where the government under President Nixon tried to institute a ban on selling gasoline on Sundays in order to reduce driving on Sundays. But as we've discussed before, the government doesn't know all the uses, let alone the values of those uses for oil. Right? We've discussed this a little bit already, but oil is used in many things and is related to the production of many things, and markets are linked together, meaning changes in any one market is going to cause ripple effects in many other markets. For example, obviously oil is critical in the production of both steel and vegetables. How do you decide the relative value of those two things if we have to choose? This is the information problem. Prices also provide incentives, though. It's not enough to merely have the information. You also have to figure out how to alter behavior. Ideally, each potential user of oil would compare their value of using that oil to the value of the oil itself, that is, its opportunity cost. Remember those alternative valuations. So, in conclusion then, comparing value to opportunity cost is what needs to make this decision. We remember that markets are linked, so all these valuations are happening across many different markets. Consider the choices that you're making about roses are going to end up affecting people all over the world in Kenya and Holland and many other markets in between. The markets can solve the problem of how to economize something that becomes more scarce using prices, because prices convey information and contain the correct incentives. Therefore, the economic problem is actually addressed in a way through markets using human action that escapes the possibility of human design. Stephen Landsberg gives an example in his book, Can You Outsmart an Economist?, discussing how much corn should be produced in a simple market setting. He shows that if there were a central planner, a government, I think he uses the term czar in the book, that the way that the czar would want to go about getting a certain amount of corn produced is to begin by offering the lowest price for the corn and seeing how much can be produced by the various producers, slowly raising the price such that producers produce more or more producers come to produce the corn until he finds the equilibrium price, which is to say the very, very best, even in the simplest situation, the very, very best that a government can do to solve the economic problem is merely to replicate the market. As we see, this example must necessarily be simple since markets are linked. They link the world and they contain both information and incentives. It's impossible for a central planner to mimic the price mechanism.